Hello there, this episode was requested and it is on the Earth Defense Directorate and its affiliate organizations and government structure as a result to try and expand some of the lore on this of the Buck Rogers in the 25th century universe. The Earth Defense Directorate is the primary military arm of the Earth Federation, which is the United Earth government of the 25th century and what holds humanity and all of its colonies under one roof, so to speak, keeping them all allied together in their united defense and struggle against the one major antagonist that humanity faces, the Draconians, which we'll get to in just a moment. This organization is, of course, as I said, the military wing. It serves a similar function to both the United Nations, NATO, as well as independent nations militaries that we have here on Earth. Its primary goal is akin to that of the Department of Defense or Ministry of Defense in the United States or United Kingdoms, respectively. As I said, its primary goal is the defense of the human race against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The military arms that it employs are both infantry units in their white uniforms as well as naval assets who tend to wear blue uniforms. The military ranking structures employed by them is reminiscent of Western military powers of the 20th century, the organization in and of itself spinning off from such organizations after the Third World War in the year 1987 that left humanity devastated. Of course, this Third World War would then lead to the rise of the Federation and an era of peace and prosperity for the human race. This is all sounding very familiar. Am I actually doing Buck Rogers here? Yeah. Similarities to another science fiction franchise I can think of there, where humanity went on to found a united Earth and a Federation after a devastating Third World War. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. The overall organization is one of peacekeeping by its definition. One of its major military assets, aside from fighters, which in space combat in this universe are absolutely paramount, is a major vessel known as the Searcher. The Searcher we have covered in a previous episode, so we won't really touch on it here. But the overarching goals of the organization is one of defense. It's not geared towards offensively destroying humanity's enemies necessarily, but in protecting humanity and its citizenry and all of its assets from alien aggression and transgression within their territory. As I said, the major military assets would be the naval forces in this regard, but the infantry can by no means disregarded, as they are the last line of defense if the navy can't stop the Draconians from getting in. The Defense Directorate, as a result, has got its hands full with trying to defend humanity against such inexorable powers as the Draconians. Although the basic command structures of the both infantry and naval assets are reminiscent of those of Earth of the 20th century, it should be pointed out they do seem to be a little bit more harmonious in the 25th century, operating under a single banner as a more unified singular entity, probably because of combined military tactics in that time period being so prevalent. What I mean by that is the Army and the Navy can't operate as separate entities when you're spanning whole star systems and you have territory that goes system to system. The Navy becomes the principal line of defense, but the Army is absolutely essential to work in conjunction with it, because without it, a space-borne force would simply bombard an infantry from space, meaning it's basically redundant to have an army unless you can have the naval assets keep it at bay. So combined arms of the 25th century are far more integrated with the Defense Directorate than they are necessarily of Earth in the 20th or even 21st centuries. The Defense Directorate is, of course, answerable to the Earth Federation and its principal government structure, the Computer Council, which runs most of the affairs of humanity, making logical deductive reasoning of the best way to best defend humanity and its assets, utilizing available resources against such powerful enemies. It should be noted that, ironically, the Draconians themselves are actually a race of humans, so the major non-terrestrial threat that humanity still faces, even in the 25th century, is still other humans, showing that despite how unified the Earth Federation has become and how benevolent and generally peaceful the organization wishes to be, humanity still has a long way to go before it will be a fully unified race, despite all the best efforts of the Earth Federation. The mere existence of the Draconians still informs us that humanity is still prone to infighting, when our greatest enemy is still ourselves. In case for some reason, though, you are not familiar with Buck Rogers, it was a 1979 series. It came out in the wake of the absolute juggernaut that was Star Wars, of course. With the end of Star Trek in 1969, science fiction had been considered dead to the world. It was considered a medium which was for kids. It was light-hearted entertainment, but it was fluff, it was nothing. And then along came Star Wars, and every studio started scrambling to find its own Star Wars. The champion of such things was individuals such as Glenn A. Larson, who went on to produce several of the most iconic shows of this era, one of which was also this, which directly lifted sound effects on some of his other shows, such as Battlestar Galactica. If you notice watching these two shows, the sound effects of the weapons are exactly the same, as are a lot of the broader brushstrokes: humans, machines, war, and general mutants. There's a lot of similar themes. Every studio began to sort of look, as I said, for what do we have already in our inventory that we can capitalize on this recent massive hit, such as Star Wars. And in this particular occasion, they decided that Buck Rogers, which was something they'd been sitting on for years, was worth a go. Of course, the basic storyline is that Buck Rogers, an astronaut, his ship is blown off course in the 1980s, and he becomes frozen in time by extraordinary circumstances and is woken up by a Draconian vessel on its way to Earth for, as they say, peace talks. They're not going for peace talks. And at which point, eventually, he realizes that he's being duped by the bad guys and helps foil their evil and nefarious plans to conquer humanity. And thus begins the journey of Buck Rogers, the hero of the 25th century. The show starred Jill Gerard and Erin Gray as the two principal stars, with a very talented supporting cast, which would do things like voice the little robot Tweaky, Tim O'Connor as one of the major scientific and leading minds of humanity, Tom Christopher, who played Hawk, the last survivor of a alien-ish race of bird-like people-ish that were destroyed, interestingly, by humanity. As well as I said, an excellent general supporting cast. The show, to save money, utilised a lot of props and again sound effects and anything else that was left over from the production of other attempts at launching a science fiction franchise to rival Star Wars. From Battlestar Galactica, as stated, they would use the same sound effects, some of the same costumes, and quite frankly, pretty much all the same people that made them, or at least in a lot of cases. And that, if you haven't seen it, is Buck Rogers in the 25th century. It's a campy show based on much older comic book serials, as are many things, which is very enjoyable, but is definitely a show of its time. I'm not going to say it's aged badly or anything, because I don't think it has, and it's fondly remembered by the people that watched it. I do remember watching it myself as a child, but I think I had more of a warm-hearted feeling towards shows from the late 70s like Battlestar Galactica again, Star Trek of course, and a number of others like UFO also come to mind, Space 1999. And Buck Rogers to me always felt like the bit of an outlier. Definitely enjoyable, but there was something about its extra campy tone that I didn't personally ever really connect with. I don't know about you as the audience is watching it. I did like certain elements of it, but I was very young, and I'll be honest, I wasn't even born when this came out, but I wasn't far off. So when I watched this, shows like Star Trek The Next Generation had already come out, and this instantly made this, which had no follow-up series and wasn't something you could continue to watch, feel very dated and like a thing of the past. However, as I've grown older and I've rewatched it, it has increased in appreciation for me. Not to mention learning more about the history of it, where it came from, how it was developed, the stories from behind the scenes, and which people really enjoyed making it, does give me a renewed perspective and good positive feeling about the show overall. So, would anyone watch this? Would you like to see a revival of Buck Rogers? Because I've tried to cover it a few times on this channel, but it's a difficult one to cover because being such a product of the 70s, it's very serialized. Messy episodes in a bottle, things like that. It's not an easy one to cover lore on because the lore gets a little wonky. Character development is also a little wonky, and they don't really, although things like the Defense Directorate, the Earth Federation, they're talked about, you encounter them, they're not fully fleshed out like they would be in a more modern series, and it makes them a little difficult to expand upon. But a more modern show could take that in a completely different direction, and we could see an updated version of this that could be awesome. Would that be something you'd want to see, or is the 70s one just like it's done, don't do it again? Let me know in the comment section below. Please like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and made it all the way to the end. Hit the bell notification icon because that is the real subscribe button in case you're ever wondering, and that'll keep you up to date with all the uploads from this channel. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.